So today we're going to talk about the pros and cons of CrossFit, because this is a really common topic that I get questions on. Questions like, is CrossFit good or bad? Or should I be doing CrossFit? So the goal of this video is just to be as objective as I can, not to bash or support CrossFit, but like I said, just being objective in presenting the pros and cons and letting you figure out if you want to do this going forward or not. So just another quick disclaimer is I don't perform CrossFit, so I'm not a CrossFitter. So if you feel like I shouldn't be talking about this, or if you want to take this with like a grain of salt, that's completely up to you. This is just my opinion and what I've seen, so just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by talking about the pros of CrossFit. One of the bigger pros of CrossFit is that it's done in a group setting. And CrossFit has done a great job at just creating a community or creating places where you can have those social friendships and relationships, and building all of that up just makes your experience a lot more enjoyable as far as working out. So it increases that motivation. Like I said, it makes it a lot more enjoyable. So that's one thing that CrossFit really does well, is just creating that community so you really enjoy your experience. Another big pro is the competitive aspect of CrossFit. So if you're somebody that is more competitive by nature, or like an ex-athlete, CrossFit, the way the workouts are done is they're done in, like I said, a competitive aspect. So for example, workouts are typically done for like time. You have to get your workout done in as quick of a time as you can, or for rounds, as many rounds as you can get, or for reps, or for PRs. So CrossFit does a great job at making it competitive. The next pro is that, in theory, CrossFit should be training all energy systems. And what do I mean by that? By different energy systems. So just a quick example, the energy system you would need to run a marathon would be completely different than running a 100-meter sprint, and that would be completely different than being like a competitive power lifter. So in theory, like I said, CrossFit should be training all of those different energy systems, essentially making you like a balanced athlete. The reality of it, though, is that most CrossFit gyms don't really get this right, because it does take a high level of programming to making sure that you're efficiently hitting all of these different energy systems. But like I said, in theory, that's something that CrossFit does right, because most people just don't get that type of training. Another pro is just the exposure to compound lifts. So CrossFit has done a great job at repopularizing the compound lifts, meaning the squats, deadlifts, overhead presses. And that, you can make the argument, they're the reason why you see a lot more squat racks and platforms in gyms nowadays because of this. But even at that, most people still don't get enough of that. You'll go to a commercial gym, and most people are either on a treadmill or are using some of the weight machines. And like I said, CrossFit does a great job at making sure their athletes and their clients are getting exposed to these compound lifts very frequently. So that's another pro. And the final pro is that you can potentially get your results or get in shape from CrossFit. So whatever those results may be. So I've seen I know plenty of people that have lost weight, or that have put muscle on, or that have gotten better endurance from CrossFit. So you can definitely see results from performing CrossFit. So let's go ahead and transition to the cons. And just a heads up, a lot of the cons, or a lot of the issues that I have with CrossFit, are more in regards to the increased injury risk. But with good programming, you can really minimize these risks that you'll see within the cons. Just kind of keep that in mind. So the first one is just CrossFit typically has a very advanced exercise selection, particularly with Olympic lifts and jumping. Olympic lifts on their own are some of the most technical type of lifts that you can do, and it takes people months to even years to really perfect these lifts. So having somebody just come off the street and start performing Olympic lifts, you're asking for an injury. Same thing with jumping. It may not seem as technical, but somebody that hasn't jumped for years and is overweight, that's going to be a lot of impact on that person's joints, and you're also increasing that risk of injury. So a lot of these exercises, like I mentioned, may be a little too advanced for the vast majority of people. The next con is too much training to fatigue. Because of that competitive aspect, a lot of people typically like to go full on, balls to the wall, as hard as they can every single day. And that's how you're going to drive yourself into the ground quickly, and that's how you get injured. So not putting enough emphasis on recovery is another big thing I see within CrossFit gyms. Like I said though, you can definitely avoid this or minimize this with good programming, but just the reality is just most CrossFit gyms aren't the best programmed. Okay, the third con is just random programming and not enough long-term scalability. The sad reality is that most CrossFit gyms, you walk in there and they just put on the workout of the day from the CrossFit website without any rhyme or reason. And when you're looking for long-term goals or long-term scalability, there's no way you can scale that because it's just random. So I also mentioned with good programming, which some CrossFit gyms have, just not the majority of them, you can definitely avoid this. But by doing that, you're also increasing your injury risk. And the fourth con is just a general fixed program for everybody. And I know this is a little bit harder to individualize because it is a group setting, but there just isn't typically enough individuality because the set workout of the day that you have, everybody essentially has to do that. And like I mentioned earlier, some of these exercises are very advanced. So you need a level of individuality for somebody that's new versus somebody that's very advanced. And along with the exercise selection, typically the volume and intensities are fixed as well. So everybody is doing the same amount of volume and everybody is prescribed the same amount of weight. Granted, there's different levels that you can pick from, but they're all fixed. They're not individualized to anybody. So everything is fixed from the exercises to the intensity or weight and the volume. And you need that level of individuality, like I said, depending on where you're at fitness-wise. And typically CrossFit doesn't get that right. And just the final con is there's not enough specificity for certain goals. And just a couple quick examples is if your goal is to maximize hypertrophy or just getting as buff as you can. Because we're technically training different energy systems, you're never going to maximize that in CrossFit. Or if you're training for a certain sport, you're not going to want to perform CrossFit because CrossFit is a sport itself. And you're almost doing yourself a disservice because you're not getting as specific as you can to prepare for a certain sport because you're preparing for CrossFit. So it's not specific in that sense either. So hopefully you can get a better understanding of the pros and cons of CrossFit from this whiteboard. Hopefully this helps as far as you getting a better understanding and potentially making a decision on whether or not you'd want to participate in CrossFit or not down the line. So hopefully this helps, and let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys later.